Welcome to the show. Today we're going to take on the controversial topic of virginity and abstinence pledges. These pledges are becoming more common across the U.S., with some schools pushing abstinence-only sex education. Another new phenomenon is abstinence as a trend. We have several young Disney stars pledging virginity until marriage in the public eye. There are programs and ceremonies dedicated to pledging abstinence until marriage. Ladies, where are we standing on this topic?
It's interesting because Joe Jonas is an example, and so is Miley Cyrus, of people that have decided to wear these purity rings and take these pledges, saying that they're going to wait. But they have both actually broken their pledges.
Yeah, so what does that mean in terms of this being a more sexually promiscuous, should we say, society, and having celebrities sort of turning it around and going to a more conservative sexual opinion?
I think the idea behind it is great because it gives freedom for people to kind of decide what they want to do, if they want to be sexually active, because the media does sexualize both men and women, as well as, you know, saying that it is okay to be a virgin and it is okay to wait till you're married. My issue with it is that it seems like it's more of a trend than truthful.
So do we feel like it's more empowering for these youth to decide that they're going to stay pure until marriage? Or is it more of us trying to control the young people of America into this way of life that we're choosing?
In my opinion, I think it's probably empowering in a sense for the celebrities to be able to make that choice. And I also think that a lot of their managers and I guess the big corporations are probably trying to
as a publicity thing?
Yeah, like as a publicity, try and maybe encourage chastity, and really, because, like Miley Cyrus and Joe Jonas, they really appeal to, like, the younger crowd, like younger teenagers and people who are just starting to think about, sex and sexual choices. And so, I think it's in my opinion, I think it's mainly a publicity stunt, because obviously I think almost everybody who has made that pledge has broken it. And so,
interesting. So is it a trend, or is it an undercover political campaign being run through these young celebrities?
I mean, you never know. I think that, in my opinion, I don't really think that people are going to take it seriously, especially once they've seen that they've all been broken. And they'll be like, no, it's not.
What about Tim Tebow, though? I mean, Tim Tebow is, he is a real, true virgin, and he is a sexy man. He is, I mean, he's a very attractive man, and I'm sure that he has women crawling over him all the time. So my question, I guess, would be the difference between him and the young Disney stars.
That's true. People who choose it as a personal choice, or who maybe are pushed into it when they're younger, whether it's
or if it's a trend,
a trend or a type of empowerment. These are all really interesting questions. After this quick commercial break, we'll come back and we'll talk about the sexual education systems that are popping up in schools all over the country.
Have you been looking for a purity ring and haven't found any for your liking? Come on down to 43rd and Broadway to Jameson's Jewelry to browse through our large selection this Saturday for our annual ring sale.
Welcome back. So, as I said, we were going to start talking about the abstinence-only sex education programs that are popping up in high schools and extracurricular programs. I wanted to take a moment before we delve into this discussion just to read the pledge that a pledge program called True Love Waits is having all of their members sign to. So, here it goes. I am making a commitment to myself, my family, and my Creator that I will abstain from sexual activity of any kind before marriage. I will keep my body and my thoughts pure as I trust in God's perfect plan for my life. So obviously a very controversial topic. So let's hear some opinions. How do we feel about these pledges?
I mean, clearly abstinence is the only form of birth control that's 100%. I do, however, and I respect that people are taking these pledges. I think it's very noble of them. I think that we also need to realize as a society that younger kids are having sex before marriage, and that it is part of society, especially because the media now is so sexualized. I think that sex is also a great thing, but being informed, educated is very important, especially about different types of birth control that can protect you, at both men and women, as well as
Well,
go ahead.
let's hear another side of this argument, because I know that you had some thoughts prepared that were sort of, devil's advocate to this idea of, promoting an open sex education. So, how are you feeling about the abstinence-only programs?
Yes, well, I definitely completely respect and basically agree with your opinion, but just to play devil's advocate for the sake of doing so. I remember I had heard an argument on another talk show, talking, just basically saying that people are taught proper morals, like not to kill and not to steal, and nobody ever questions that. So why not throw, sexuality in? Because it is better at least to prolong it, even though sex is definitely not on the same par with killing and stealing. It still is something that people should wait and make sure that they are completely aware of. And even if you're teaching kids about, even like in a comprehensive, not just abstinence only, but comprehensive program about sexual health, I think it would be best if they waited until they're at least of legal age, just because their minds and their bodies are still developing.
So you mean you agree with consent then, having informed consent, which I also think is very important. I think as a sex positive ideal, it's good to be educated about the different types of birth control and how effective they are and what the consequences are, because I think that there's a lack of knowledge with that among our society.
Absolutely. So just to throw this out there, I have a statistic here in front of me that 2 out of 3 teens state that they regret their initial sexual activity and wish that they had waited. Do you think that adding a sex-positive, comprehensive sexual education program in addition to some of the abstinence-only programs would help to make people more aware of sex and be more informed about their decisions when they're younger?
Yeah, I think that being informed is probably the biggest issue here. I think that it is the lack of knowledge that people have. I mean, there's people that are saying that they didn't know that they could get an STD when they were on some type of birth control. And I think that that's a real problem, and I think that's why there's also that regret, is because they don't necessarily know all the options to them, including abstinence. Abstinence is not a bad thing. Sex is not a bad thing.
City Hall has your tickets for this weekend's Father-Daughter Purity Ball Dance. Make sure to stop by and pick yours up.
Welcome back to the show. So we actually had a great opportunity. Our very own Madison and Liz actually had the opportunity to speak with Randy Wilson, who created these events called Purity Balls, which are father-daughter events in which the father pledges to cover his daughter as her authority and protection in the area of purity. So tell us a little bit about that before we see Madison's interview.
These events, it is a strictly father-daughter ball where the daughters, they wear white gowns and they actually lay a white rose under a cross, validating that their father has this authority about their purity. It also, the pledge continues on, and it also talks about how the father is a man of integrity and is supposed to be a role model, as well as he is the position of the high priest in the house. So we will see more of that from Randy Wilson's perspective with Madison a little bit later. The hardest thing about this, though, is this type of event, I feel, limits our society. We are slowly but surely becoming more and more comfortable with, gays and lesbians and, gay marriage and everything like that. But I think that we fail to hold a place for people that are not necessarily straight men and women, in the sense that they don't have a place if they're virgins or if they're allowed to be pure.
Well, that's very true. And if you think about, in certain states where gay marriage is not legal, what is this whole stigma about premarital sex if it's not legal for you to get married? Or, this whole emphasis on teen pregnancy. If your sexual choices are such that you're not going to be getting pregnant, what is it to, protect against teen pregnancy? I know that you had some comments about that you wanted to say, and I'm really interested to hear your opinion on this.
Yeah, just based off of our society's general idea of what sex is, it's very, very strict. It's very narrow. It's typically penile vaginal intercourse, and that's it. And so,
when in reality, there is a huge variety of other sexual activity that's not spoken about or not implied in these conversations, correct?
Exactly. And so it makes everything about, sex education and purity balls, it makes it so exclusive that I feel like some people we completely disregard it, which is not what we want anyone to do. And so,
well, I think it's also interesting that that this event in particular, as well as many other things when we talk about, the virginity and, sex and who's in the wrong and so on and so forth, we are usually talking about the female. I mean, this is strictly a father-daughter ball. When I talked to Randy Wilson, he was talking about that there is a manhood ceremony. They do not talk about purity. They talk about the boys in that community becoming a man.
Interesting. So very heterosexual culture for this group.
Yeah, it's interesting because it really raises the question, just like when we're talking about sex education within the schools, about who we're really pinpointing and who we're worried about getting pregnant, or who is and isn't using birth control, and who is abstaining from sex versus who isn't, and really what that means to our society.
Yeah, absolutely. I think these are all terrific points, and I think that we could all use a broader definition of what sex is when we're having these conversations about abstinence and purity and what have you. Keeping these things in mind, here's the interview of our own Madison interviewing Randy Wilson about the purity balls. Thanks for tuning in, and have a great night.